Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, Dr. Saltzman is returning to the Salvatore school. Instead of Caleb by his side, though, he's got MG by his side to be his, not sober buddy, but accountability buddy. So I thought that was kind of a nice touch. But obviously, coming back to the school was waiting for him, not the surprise party he was expecting, but another surprise, and that is Hope. Because Hope needs their help with all this. Even she can admit, yeah, I kind of set events in motion where the gods might be in a position to be returning to us. To be fair, Jen was out and about doing her thing anyway, but Lizzie and Aurora are most likely going to awaken the gods in general. So, because Jen's kind of doing her own thing, so it makes you wonder, does she ever have any plan? I'm assuming, like, it's probably her own family that's in those coffins, but does she ever have... She's carrying them around. I mean, I didn't think about it. Just thinking about it now, I didn't think about it during the episode, but I'm like, Could she be the Klaus in this situation where it's like, yeah, my family's on punishment. I mean, it is my family, so I don't want to get rid of them, but I also don't want them awake, so I just tote them around. Or maybe she's waiting for the right time. I don't know. Because Klaus would obviously dagger and put his family members, his siblings in coffins, just to punish them and stuff whenever they did something, they stepped out of line or irritated them more often than not, so... I'm curious if her circumstances are the same. Be interesting if that were just the parallel of, like, eventually her and Hope crossing paths again eventually, and just, like, the parallels of who they are. That, maybe Jen or Vulcan has a very similar, complicated history, just like Hope does. I'm curious, is there going to be any parallels between Vulcan and Ben? Are they related in any shape or form? Are they family? Because it'd be interesting if it turns out one of the gods in those coffins, I would assume just for storytelling purposes and just creating drama, one of those people in that coffin, even if they're not family to Jen, it might just be like, well, we're all gods, so we're related. But I'm assuming one of them has got to be Ben's dad, right? Or at very least the end result to this is Ben's dad. It's kind of interesting too. Once again, my mind's firing on these different thoughts because I'm like, right, just kind of makes me think of like the gods awakening. Not only do I think about the Michelson family, the siblings, but I also think about the heretics a little bit when they like popped up in the Vampire Diaries, like this family of them. So, and it'd be an interesting parallel considering Lizzie's a heretic now too. So there's just many different lanes in which they could handle that and parallel stuff depending on just like who's in the coffin and just what circumstances they want to bring them potentially about, awaken them in, so. But circling back, Alaric is trying not to make decisions on his own anymore, so he's trying to get input from the super squad and stuff, because he's initially turning down Hope's need for help, because he's like, right, if I could, I'd try and kill you right now for what you've done to me and my daughter, murdering my daughter. It's like, I attempted murder, she came back to life. It's like, but I can't, trying to be a better person, trying to do things the right way this time. So ultimately she presents herself to the super squad, which the numbers are dwindling with no Josie or Lizzie around. So sadly, a lot of them are, sadly for Hope rather, none of them really want to work with her because none of them can really trust her. They want her back, but not the way she is now. And sadly for her, Aurora kind of messed Cleo up, so her magic isn't what it was, so she can't really help inspiring an idea. And then, gets introduced to Ben, is like, cool, I'm one of the gods, and it's like, all right, tell me about this curse of yours, and she uses that to her advantage, because like the biggest douchebag in the world, she breaks the bracelet that keeps all the monsters away, just because it's like, cool, I'm going to force you to accept my help, because there's a monster that's going to come here, and you're not going to have what it takes to beat it. The only person that can is me, so you're going to have no choice but to accept my deal. quite the hard bargain she's bargaining. So, and what does show up? The creepiest clown in the world. Obviously, they even make a Pennywise reference in the episode. It's like, I think what makes this thing is potentially just as horrifying as Pennywise. I thought that was interesting how we had that beginning. The fact is they set up that beginning that way to introduce the concept behind this thing. It's like, normally they wouldn't give a monster that much setup. So I'm like, that witch that created the clown, she must play some role going forward in this season. Like, because it was just too much of an opening and too much of a thing. I mean, I guess it's like, right, you got those, I mean, but it has to have some story relevance, because like that circus ultimately did. Like they gave the circus that not huge amount of setup, but like it had a cold opening of that circus before Lizzie and Hope eventually showed up and, killed the head honcho of that circus. But I'm curious like how that's going to play. I'd assume that witch might still, or at least like some bloodline of hers is still there. We'll see what ends up happening. But this thing ends up biting Jed, and it has the power to make you relive your biggest regrets. Which we learned a lot about Jed in this episode because of that. Sadly, he wasn't the only one poisoned, because Alaric decided we can use this to force Hope to turn her humanity back on. But that kind of backfired, because she then used the spell to shoot Caleb, MG, and Wade with that. We never, I'm assuming we have an idea of what MG's was, I think, because he's kind of faced it before being a Ripper, so I think that's probably one of his biggest regrets. We got we got something from Caleb about his. We never found out what Wade's was. I'm curious what that is. That's a big, oh no, what? Because I thought we'd see inside that, but we didn't. The only person we really got a lot of insight into was Jed, but, well, and Hope. I mean, we knew what Hope's was going to be, but I'm so curious what Wade's was. I'm curious in the future episode, if not the next episode, would it be like, oh yeah, Wade, we never actually found out. What was your biggest regret? Like, maybe it'd be something that seems silly, like maybe it's a game-related thing, just showing you how pure Wade is, that he's never done something so terrible, maybe. Or maybe he has some regrets about, like, oh yeah, I wish I'd, hung out with my bro Landon more before, maybe stuff like that. Maybe it wasn't any thing deep and dark because Wade has such a pure heart, or maybe it actually is something deep and dark, that there's a darkness in Wade that he's had to deal with that no one really knows. Until Landon, he never really had any friends at the school, really, I don't think, if I remember correctly. So I don't know. I'm curious what if we'll ever get any insight to that. But circling back, focusing on Jed, getting some insight into his dad and how much of his dad just immediately seemed like the drunk abusive type, but he was the alpha. And then when you look at the way his dad's leading, even Jed comes to the conclusion later on, but you're like, oh, so that's why Jed did what. I mean, usually that's what that is. If someone's a bully, it's usually because they were bullied or something's going, they're suffering something. Sadly, abuse is this thing, because when someone is abusive towards you and beats you down, you, to make yourself feel better, you're something inside of you makes you go, no, I need to do it to someone else. I need to feel powerful to make up for a moment where you didn't feel powerful. So it's a psychological thing, and it's man, to understand that aspect of Jed, of usually if someone is a bully, if you bully someone, that person will eventually bully someone else just to feel more powerful. And so his dad put him in a situation people might not like the way we do things here, but our rules are the way they are. They might be harsh, but this is what it is. So if anyone wants to change things, they have to challenge me, and no one challenged him as alpha. So he put Trey, the moment Trey and Jed were there in front of each other, he's like, I want you two to come over here. I was like, oh boy. And they're staying in front of each other. I was like, is this going to be a Peacemaker situation? If you've seen Peacemaker, you know what I'm thinking. I was like, please don't tell me this is supposed to be that. That's super messed up. And it kind of is. It's cool. One of you is going to transform into a wolf. It's yeah, well, what about the other? It's well, you got to activate your curse, right? Put a bat between them. It's one of you is going to have to kill the other. And ultimately, Trey was like, right, you were always the better wolf, because that's how they pretend play, like, oh, like, I'm wolf, and, I'm hunting to find you. And Trey was like, go ahead and do it. But we didn't see it, but Jed says he didn't do it. In fact, I was like, is he going to attack his dad? And I guess he waited till his dad was vulnerable and ended up killing his dad. That's why I'm surprised he was able to kill his dad. I found that so fascinating. And he even talks about it later on, like, he's worked so hard for so many years to never think about that, and one bite from that clown got him thinking about something he never wanted to think about again. But now it makes him realize, well, he says that he activated, that's always the saddest things of knowing how everyone activated their curse. That is always like the rub of, like, right, don't ever forget. It doesn't come up that often, but you have to remember, like, right, to activate your curse, you have to kill somebody. And that's the heartbreaking aspect of the whole werewolfism. Just knowing, like, for example, Hope activated hers completely on accident back in the final season of the originals, accidentally killing someone that was in a church. She didn't even know he was in there, so ended up activating her curse like that. And to know that about Jed, to protect someone else he cared about, he ended up killing his dad. And his biggest regret for that situation wasn't even killing his dad. It's the fact is, once he activated his curse, he ran away. So it makes you wonder whatever happened to the rest of his dad's pack. Like, did they scatter? Did someone else rise up? Whatever happened to Trey? He hasn't seen Trey since. He even says, like, eventually Dr. Saltzman found me. It's like, wow. Both him and MG come from, like, messed up family situations. For that to be their circumstances, I find that so fascinating. Both have... I think things were better between him and his mom. They were still complicated. Things still aren't good between him and his dad. So... Granted, it didn't end the same way between him and Jed, but I wonder is the thing that the one I'm sitting here thinking about. I was like, I wonder is it like MG's greatest one being when he ended up killing Landon? Is that his biggest regret? Because I think didn't Malavor throw that in his face last time, if I'm not mistaken. So that might still be one of his biggest regrets, but it might have just been one of his first instances of finding out he was a ripper. Like, maybe that's what it was. I don't know. Because Landon wasn't the first person he'd accidentally killed, I don't think. If I'm remembering correctly. I could be mistaken. But I think it all worked out in the end. Like, it's interesting because there's a lot of therapeutic elements to this episode. This clown for everybody, and then everything Aurora and Lizzie are up to. But for Jed, it made him realize that he doesn't want to kind of live in the past anymore, because he's finally able to kind of let go. I'm not going to be the person. I'm going to be who I want to be, not the person my dad wanted me to be. And, because even then, he's like, right, he never realized how he felt about Trey. He was like, right, it was like we were kids, it was a crush, so he didn't think much of it. But now it's like, in retrospect, it's like, now he's ready to kind of put his heart out there. Like, because he wanted to tell Ben the entire episode, like, how he felt, especially when Ben was like, right, I'm going to draw the monsters away. But Ben was like, why are you hesitating, Jed? It's not like the monsters can kill me, but it's just because Jed didn't want to see him get hurt. It doesn't matter if you can come back. Like, no, even when, it doesn't stop the hurt from, like, oh, seeing someone you care about ripped to pieces. So, but at the end, Jed lays a big one on Ben. I was wondering if it was going to complicate things because of the whole Trey thing, but it seems that's not the case. So I wonder will we ever see Trey pop up at some point during the show, and a little bit more of like Jed having to confront his past, and it's like, right, you kind of left me behind through all that, so I had to suffer like even more because of what you. I wonder if they'd create a storyline like that or not, but I'm happy for Jed, and I'm happy for Ben. Obviously, like, he hasn't had anyone in his life for a very, 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 very long time. So it's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. Obviously, Cleo was locked up because initially it was Caleb, but he locked her up instead because it's like, right, I need to keep you safe. And she kind of calls him out for that later on. He regrets what he did. He's like, I'm sorry, because she's the one that ended up helping basically her and Alaric, though kind of quote unquote weakest that they needed to protect him and MG needed to protect these two people because they're in a weakened state, ended up being the ones that ultimately ended up saving the day. And I love for Cleo, she's like, right, I am powerful. The sad thing is you kept saying that, but you didn't believe it. You were just saying that just to say it, just to make me feel better, but you didn't actually believe it. And he's like, I'm sorry, but I believe it now. I just hope it's not too late. And she's like, it's not. Just don't try to be my protector or shield. That's not what I need. Don't fight in front of me. Fight beside me. So I thought that was kind of nice. Once again, relationship elements to it. I do like that luckily they were able to kill the clown. Obviously, Alaric learned a lot about confronting a lot of the bad stuff he's done. He writes them all down on notes because that's how this thing was made in the first place, is all your sins were written down and you put it in this effigy and then you burn it. I wonder, is that true? I'm assuming that's pulling from real mythology. Clowns date that far back? That's so fast. I mean, I guess it's not that big of a surprise because I mean they obviously go back to even medieval times because like jesters and stuff, but still, like, to know that they have a tie to like Egypt and stuff like that, it's fascinating. I love to do more research into that. I don't know if I'm one of those people that's afraid of clowns. I mean, there are instances of like real world reasons why you could be afraid of clowns because of certain people who use clown get-ups as their thing. Won't mention said. I'll reference a certain serial killer. Won't say their name because it's not worth saying, but still. Or, you know, and just in a grand pop zeitgeist is the whole, as they reference this episode, Pennywise thing. So I can see why clowns are scary. It's always interesting that is, I feel like over the years it's become more and more of a thing of like, oh yeah, people are afraid of clowns. It's like, but people had to be like, no, I'm not afraid of clowns. It's like, I think it's understandable how to be afraid of clowns because like when you just look at clowns by themselves, you're like, it's kind of weird, a little freaky. I can see how that will kind of cause some potential childhood trauma in you, and that it will kind of stick with you. Tangents and all that aside, while it's so busy gorging on all of Alaric's sins, you have Cleo using the cane. I guess either she enchanted it because like the cane naturally has a blade to it after it gets unsheathed, which I'm like, oh, I'm all about cane swords. I'm like, oh, that's sick. It's, I don't know, because it seems like such a like nobilic thing to have like a cane sword because it's almost just like, it's almost like a fencing blade almost. I mean, it's a thinner blade, but I'm trying to think I was like, why does a cane sword sound so familiar to me? I was like, what was I thinking? I was thinking of V from Devil May Cry 5. I was like, right, that's probably the most recent example I've seen of like a cane blade. To a certain extent. Well, that never doesn't turn into a sword, does it? I think he just stabs you with the cane. I don't think it actually turns into a blade. But regardless, it made me think of that. Because I was like, yeah, I was thinking about someone else stabbing things with the cane. And I was like, yeah, that. But I'm assuming she just enchanted the blade, the cane with ice. But I think it is actually a blade too. So luckily they dealt with that situation. So. And the clown proceeded to melt like the Wicked Witch in Wizard of Oz. Jeez, I'm making all the references today, aren't I? But we also have to circle back to the interesting development of Hope. She ended up going back to the day that she killed Landon. But instead, in her mind, she broke the blade because she's like, no, we'll find another way. Like, can't kill the boy that I love. But she's like, right, that didn't happen and you can't change it. It's like, yeah, but there's some part of you, even with your humanity off, somewhere deep down inside, you know it didn't have to be that way. So I was right. Her humanity didn't flip back on, but the way she was acting like at the end of the previous episode, it's there though. It's bubbling beneath the surface. Her humanity is still there. I'm like, oh, she's like, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm the real Hope Michelson and I'm ready to come back. And she's just kind of like, no, like, I'm done with you. You know, we'll see. And then the humanity hope is like, right, we will. And so she sadly has to take the deal that Alaric comes up with. Like, right, we're not going to work for you. We will work with you. But, because truth be told is we don't need your help, Hope. We would want it, but not this version of you. So we will work with you, but it will be on our terms, and we won't be subjugated by you. And you could tell it kind of caught her off guard, because it's almost just kind of like, annoying that she can't bend them to her will like she'd want to. And even the fact that she's almost kind of pouting in her room, just kind of like, ugh, like nothing worked out the way she wanted it to. And then we see at the very end, her humanity's there, and she's like, MG, I told you to go. It's like, well, you thought you could get rid of me that easy? And it's her humanity. It's like, even without the clown, it's her, the cracks were already there. Her humanity was already slipping through, and now the cracks have grown even more. And now her humanity's slipping through more and more. It's like, oh, you're not getting away from me. She's being haunted by herself from now on. So that's an interesting development. It's only a matter of time before her humanity comes back. And I'm curious, is she going to try and find a way to completely snuff out her humanity? It's like, no, I'm going to win in the end. But it's like, no, you're not. It's like I said, it's just going to be a matter of time. I'm fascinated to see how that ultimately ends up playing out. Couldn't get rid of your Jiminy Cricket that easy. So, but those were those developments on that front. On the Aurora and Lizzie front, which I love that they make such an interesting duo. I love it. The fact is that they are two peas in a pod. Once again, like until you put those characters side by side, you're like, man, they are so similar. I would have never thought. I mean, once again, it's been so long since the originals and when Aurora popped up. It's been so long that it didn't cross my mind to think like, oh, think of Aurora. Well, because the reason why she was also in my head, because obviously the actress Rebecca Breeds is in the show Clarice, so like that was even more in my mind recently about like, oh, because that's obviously as Aurora was the thing I best knew her from this show. Because when I saw her, I was like, why does she look so familiar? And then I looked at it, I was like, all right, she's Aurora from the originals. Tangents and all that aside, the therapeutic elements between them, where they both have severe trust issues, understandably considering what each one of them wants and, you know, what side of the good and evil side of things that they're both kind of on right now. And I love that Lizzie, out of anyone, is giving her like therapeutic advice, being like, right, because she went through therapy herself in the past, but obviously it was very old school therapy, some very like not conventional, very super messed up therapy. And she even says like, right, like starts giving her advice, even does the typical therapist saying, and how does that make you feel? You're like, oh, you're good, Lizzie, you're good. And the fact is that she could make, I was about to call her Rebecca by her real name, make Aurora confront the fact is, right, maybe you weren't, you know, the one needed to be fixed. Maybe the problem was your brother Tristan sounds abusive and toxic, you know? And she was like, right, don't, almost like she gets very defensive of like, yeah, don't talk about my brother like that. But they are both kind of very codependent in their own respective ways. Like she relied so heavily on her brother. Her brother was kind of her rock, her center. And she already kind of felt like she was off, but she ends up getting on Lizzie's case later on. It's like, right, you're only with me because you don't want to be alone, that you don't love yourself enough. Like, despite my issues, I might not be 100% right in the head, but despite my issues, I do love myself. Can you say the same thing? The fact is you're so codependent, like all this, your main thing for doing all this is, oh, you want your dad back, but you also want your sister back, and you want Hope having her humanity back, because you need someone around. And because that's why she stuck around Hope, because she was like, right, she doesn't think she hadn't brought that up to Aurora, but for her, it's like being around Hope meant that she didn't have to be alone with herself. So it worked out in the end. And now that's why she's doing it, because Aurora is kind of like her crutch in this particular case of, I don't want to be alone because I can't be alone with myself. I can't be happy if I'm alone with myself. As Aurora's trying to pick it like, oh, you have to feel superior to someone else. And ultimately, they're kind of forced into a blood pact. It's like, cool, you just got rid of the sire bond situation, now you're in a blood pact. It's like, cool, we both ensure that we get what we want in the end. But in the end, Aurora's like, right, some of what you said was right, and also some of the stuff I said to you was also right. So, in the end, I think they are going to be a big help to each other, grow past their respective situations and end up growing and becoming better versions of themselves in the long run. I think. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see as that progresses. Obviously, they run into Jin, and it's like cool. Wondering who's in those coffins. I love that it's like Jennifer. Aurora calls it Jennifer. It's like it's just Jin. So we shall see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I'm very, very excited to find out. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good